Hi, welcome to Floppy Friday number 22. This is Kian. I'm going to show you, this is actually a bit different. Again, they're all a bit different, but so there you go. This one is not going to show any games at all. This is going to show some stuff that I came across today, in fact, just early this morning. I was doing a little bit of research for a blog post that I'll be putting out next week. But in the process, I found out that the founder of Autodesk, John Walker, who also lives in Switzerland, not too far from here, explored the possibilities of the home computer platform back in the late 80s, I would say 87, 88, probably around then, and actually wrote some Commodore 64 code. He wrote some programs that ended up being published via some magazines. One of them was not published because it was a bit too before its time, a bit too cutting edge. But we'll see all three of them. So there's three that I'm going to talk about and show you. I put them all onto a floppy so that they can be loaded. They're all available via formulab.ch, which is John's website. I'll provide links in my blog post and probably via YouTube as well. So the first one we're going to look at, which is interesting. So I'm going to load the floppy. It's on here. I'm going to put it in here. So one of the one of the programs is a Commodore 128 program. So I've had to do a bit of shuffling. I could have used the Commodore 128 for all three of them, of course, because it has a Commodore 64 mode. But I decided not to. I decided to start with the C64. So let's take a look here. We'll look at what have I done? Oh, of course. All right, first things first. Turn on the floppy. And I probably should have done that before turning on the computer, of course. All right, there we go. So we have three programs. The first is called KClick 64, then there's Moon, and then there's Brainsim. So we're going to start with KClick 64. Now this is it's a bit of fun, really, in the sense that what it does is it allows you to remap your keyboard to insert some sounds that get played whenever you use your keyboard. So in this case, we'll start with a computer sound. There's three sounds to choose from. Go with computer. Now every time I hit a key, it makes a little boop on the keyboard, on the via the SID or the sound device. So here, let's do it again. I'll run it again, and this time. Well, it's interesting. It switches even as I'm typing it, which is a little bit weird, but maybe it just cycles through. But anyway, so this is more like meant to be more of a typewritery. Yeah, you can hear the clatter, the typewriter clatter. Anyway, so that's the next one. And then the third one is a combination of typewriter, but it also adds a kind of like a very dramatic boom or crash or cymbal. I'm not sure what. Anyway, this was John's initial kind of exploration of the platform. I mean, John was working for Autodesk at the time. He was starting to explore the possibilities of Commodore and other platforms as Microsoft had already started to port certain business applications across, and I think John really wanted to understand what was possible. So he wrote some pretty interesting stuff. This was very simple. I think he himself says it's super basic. The next one though is interesting. So this is going to be a moon simulator. So let me just got to do a few things. So I'll fast forward this bit. I've got to replug things and I'll move this out the way. Okay, so here we are with the Commodore 128. So now we're going to load. We'll put this, and we'll just use the same floppy drive. So let's put that down like that. What was it? Moon, right? So that should load Moon. This is this is interesting. It's a, John is a passionate amateur astronomer. I think that's a fair description. He wouldn't disagree with that. He's very interested by the sun and the moon and the stars. I guess that's the definition of an astronomer. Anyway, celestial bodies. So let's run this, and the first thing you need to do is put a time. So we're going to just go, it's in, so 12, 34 and 56 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to put a date. No, obviously Y2K, not Y2K compliant. This was written in the late 80s. Who'd have thought that somebody in 2021 would be running it, I suppose. So let's go for 1999. Let's go for, and let's go for the 1st of January on 1999. And then we have to choose a time zone. So of course, this is US centric. Let's go with mountain and standard time, I guess, because it's not going to be daylight to save. Well, maybe it's daylight saving time. Anyway, let's go with 6. And then it's going to do some calculations and show us the size of the moon. Full moon. I mean, what are the 99% full? What are the chances? That's kind of fun. I haven't run this with these numbers before. That's really interesting. And then I think if I hit space, there's some other stuff happening. It tells you information about the following new moon, etc. So that was moon. So that's fun. Now I'm going to reboot back into. In this case, I won't switch back, but I will cycle the power into Commodore 64 mode. All right, we'll put this back in. And let's have another look at the directory listing for these files, or this disk. And then there's the third one. It's called Brainsim. Now this is, if anything, the most astonishing of these tests, really. I mean, this was the late 80s. It was 87 or 88. I forget which. Now John said, the previous two got published via Commodore magazines. This third one did not, because I think people didn't really. They maybe thought it was a little bit out there, because what John was able to do in the late 80s was essentially create a neural network inside a Commodore. So we're going to run this. This is what Brainsim is. Now, it's called neuron network associative memory. I think John had read a couple of papers related to this, this field, this idea of being able to train neural networks. And so decided to just try it out and to see. And he's written this in like 250 lines of code, of basic code, which he's published as well. So you definitely want to check this out. So let's go and take a look. I have to first of all try and it's a little bit slow in terms of the actual training of the neural network. So what I'm going to do is load a file that I created earlier, and all it did. Oh, what's it done? All right. Well, maybe I do need to use a Commodore 64 then, or maybe it just doesn't like. Maybe it didn't find it. It could be defaulting to 8. Oh well, never mind. Let's just run it again, and I'll fast forward through the slow bits, if you like. So what I can do is I can tap in some characters. It's going to fetch the pattern for A, and what I'll then do is teach that pattern so that theoretically it'll be able to recognise that pattern of things that approximate that pattern of dots in the future. So it's taking some time to train. I'll fast forward this bit, and then I'll go and train some other characters as well. Okay, so I've gone and trained this neuron network from A to H. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. What I can do is I either go back and essentially get one of those characters. Let's get E, because it's interesting, because it is a little bit. We'll get the shape for E. We'll randomize it a bit, so it throws in some randomness, maybe a little bit more. Okay, and then we can hit recall pattern, which will then essentially, ideally, use the neural network to identify a pattern that is close to this one. So from that, it should be able to get E. I'm curious if we can do something like 8 and see whether it gets B, because that would be quite interesting. So because we haven't trained it with the number 8, for example. But here it's getting, what is it getting? It's interesting. All right, it's getting something. Well, that is interesting. What is that? Is it going to end up with a B? I wonder if it's, what it might be doing is working through the various patterns one by one, which is why it took a little less time. Before, I'd only trained it on A and B, and it was still quite slow. So maybe there's something that it's doing that it keeps flipping backwards and forwards there. So I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on. If you're interested in taking a look at this, you can take the D64 file that John has kindly posted for this particular one, and then you can essentially load that into the Vice emulator and give it a try. Just remember, I think for this one, yeah, it was Commodore 64. I don't recall whether there's a 128 version. Moon is the one that has to have the C128, whereas the other two I've been able to work with C64. So give it a try. In any case, I think, there's also a fair amount of description that John has provided in his article. I will say that it's, it is a little bit crazy that, well, is it crazy? I mean, the magazines at the time didn't see the possibilities around this, or felt that it was a little bit esoteric or a little bit peculiar, maybe just not really worth following up on. But now, of course, there's a whole industry around this, and we're talking about oh, I'm training it. I hit the wrong button. Never mind. There's a whole industry around data science and machine learning that that has been inspired by the early work that John was also inspired by. I mean, he saw the potential for it right away. Even if this kind of home computer hardware is really not quite up to doing anything meaningful with it, it's very interesting that he was able to do what he was able to do in so few lines of code. It's pretty crazy, and definitely ahead of its time. So that was it. Autodesk did create Commodore 64 or Commodore software back in the day. Who knew? I didn't. When I say, I mean, John also has done a lot of personal projects over the years, so I imagine that this is one that he was doing, on his own time, perhaps. So I think it's probably unfair to say that it was Autodesk. It's really John that did it, but he was, working for and probably still CEO of Autodesk when he wrote it. So why not? Okay, right. And with that, I think that's it for today's Floppy Friday. Not much gaming going on this week, but very historically interesting, at least from my perspective, to have found these programs and to have given it a try. So that's that. Thank you very much for paying attention and watching, and see you next week. Okay, thanks.